Come on, Twitch. Let's pop it online. There we are. We're streaming. Now I will manufacture a link. There's got to be a way to actually get a decent link, right? Doesn't make any sense that they wouldn't give you a link. They give you a link to the category you're streaming in, but not to yourself. How are you supposed to tell people that you're streaming? Just gotta memorize the link and type it each week, I guess. Streaming game dev gonna do underwater work. I got the Beatles on my brain today. There are worse things. So, we're going to go back to working on room 2 here. We're just mostly putting together assets and trying to start to put together how those assets will look in the game world. There are a large number of things we still need to create, but we're on our way towards having something that looks like a game. So hooray for us, right? I noticed this rope has an error in it. It falls through the ground and errors out. You can sort of see it tweak out here. And that's just because the handles are now in the wrong place. So all we got to do is change where the handles are. Oh, they're all locked. Unlock them. Oh, excuse me. There we go. I do like how it kind of goes down into that ravine like that, though. I guess that's all we really needed. There we are. So what we need to do next is probably set up these as hologram elements. There's a new version of Unity out. I downloaded it, but I haven't upgraded yet. But I'm really hoping that the newest version of Unity fixes this. I released. It's got like this second long delay on the flight controls, which means that I have to do everything using the middle mouse button. And that's just really slow. That's something we can work on, though. So now I want to know what this giant orange ball is. That can't be the particles. The particles don't get displayed like a giant orange ball or a giant orange square. Come on, just let me click on this right here, whatever this is. Don't know, it's not letting me see it. It might be one of our various casters. We'll find out if it is. I don't remember making anything that had an orange box around it that would be anywhere near here. I wish it were easier to put text on the boxes. I also wish it were easier to click on these boxes, because this is an interactable object. In theory, I should be able to click on it. But I can only do it sometimes when it feels like letting me. That's fine. We'll figure it out later. Anyway, it looks so crappy because we are in scene view. There's no lights, no lighting, and so we're not getting any sort of decent experience out of it. Let's take a look at it here in world view for a moment. We're going to want to extend this, because the whole point of this is the room behind us feels more alive, whereas this room goes from alive to dead over the course of the run. So we want it to feel alive, more alive, back where we were, and that's good. That's exactly the sensation I want. I don't know if you weren't watching, you probably didn't catch it, but there's this thing where we're going from these basically this kelp forest, and then when we come out the other side, it feels hollow. We may add a couple more pieces of kelp to try and make it feel a little bit more noticeable. But basically, once we come up past these rocks, it opens up into a dead zone. And that's what I want. I want this dead zone. But even though it's a dead zone, I don't want it to feel barren. I want it to feel wasted, like it's dead on purpose. One of the things I've noticed is that our particle system is really pretty aggressive here. There are a lot of things we can do about that. For now, let's just change the particle color so that it's not quite as bright, and then we'll do a couple more tests and just keep our eye on it for a while. Here's the particle system, and if we look down here into floating particles still legacy shaders, particles, additive. All we really have to do is change this tint color. We'll just make it kind of a grayish green instead of what it was before. And that'll be a lot less glowy, if you know what I mean. There are also some other things, like since we are just using a particle system that follows us around, the particles get a lot thicker when we stop because more particles spawn in. That's not necessarily a problem. One of the things we could do is we could mount it in front of the player instead of on the player. There are lots of little polish elements we could do, but when we come out into here, you can see how there's still a lot of bits, like a lot of floating debris. I'm not 100% sure that the change in color actually propagated properly. Let's find out. We're going to change it to like bright red. Okay, so it is working. It's just a fairly bright either way, so we'll change it back to being this blue-green there. Make it a little bit darker than it was before. Yeah, it's not too shabby. So in order to make this area feel a lot more desolate, we're going to add some human elements, and that means we're going to add more debris, more testing kits, stuff like that. Maybe some downed drones or something. But the idea here is this area is supposed to be dead, and it's supposed to feel like the people have come here in an attempt to figure out why, rather than just feeling like naturally nothing grows here. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to turn this into a base. Not like an inhabitable base, but like a waypoint. So let's do that. We're just going to drag in a whole bunch of assets that we created a long time ago. We may create some new assets. So here you can see some palettes, and we're just going to duplicate those palettes and drop them in room 2. We'll drop them inside of, I should have closed the rock list before doing this because it's 18 pages long, and the only reason it's open is because I was trying to click on something else and Unity wouldn't let me and fell through. Great. Now where is it? It is room 2, weighted platform. There it is. Boom. We'll just close this edge detailing for a little while. So this palette, we're just going to move it. Boom, boom, boom. And then we're going to walk on over. And here you can see the palette in all of its glory. Obviously, this palette is not exactly what we want for this particular location, but it contains a lot of the gear that we're going to want. So we're just going to start to rearrange it until it feels a little bit more natural. And basically, I want this area to feel like the people came by and we're doing stuff, and you know, you can see how this palette appears to be the source object. We're going to want to break that out. We don't need the silt clouds here, so we'll delete the silt clouds. Now that they're all broken out, we should be able to move them independently. That's better. And what we're going to do is we are going to move things so that they're a little bit willy-nilly. I think we're going to need some more rocks to do this. So before we get started with the weighted platform, let's hide the weighted platform for a second. Grab our rock sprayer. Okay, we don't have a rock sprayer in this room yet. We do have a mesh sprayer for the edge detailing of the room, which is good, but not exactly where we want right now. So let's create room 2, create empty. Didn't get created in room 2. I really don't understand why Unity doesn't really have... I think it works differently depending on whether... No, I don't know. I have no idea what it's doing. Whatever. So this is going to be rocks. And obviously we're going to take that edge detailing mesh sprayer, put it up in rocks, so that when we spray some more meshes, it will pop up in there instead. So this is the rock sprayer that we're using. I think right now it's pretty big. It's got like a lot of big rocks, and we don't really want big rocks. We'll just test it out. The stakes are low. We're going to want to shrink it considerably. It's just way too big right now. And if we take a look at the size of these rocks, here's the scale curve. Over here, it goes to, what's the edit key? There it is. 15. That's probably too big. Let's bring it down to 10. And you can see that over here, we got a problem where it actually dips down. Just gonna, there. So let's put it in place, fire it a couple of times, see what sort of results we get. There's supposed to be like a rocky outcropping here that between the rocks, there's a little sand element, and that's where they put all their shit. And that's the idea. Very, very basic setup, right? Boom. All right, so that's still pretty big. Let's go ahead and rearrange these so that they feel a little bit more like what I had in mind. And that means some of them are going to get smaller. That's fine, though. It's better than starting from scratch. You know that old idea that if you want to paint, the first thing you do is spill coffee on your painting. And after that, painting is pretty easy. That's what I hear, at least. Same idea. Just gotta set up a foundation, a framework that we can use to as a basis for us to polish our various rocks and stuff. So this is more or less what I had in mind. It's just that things are a little bit wrong sized. That's fine though. That's more or less how I wanted that. Now we're going to go ahead and edit the backdrop. Oh, good, it's paint texture. That's one of the big nice things that they fixed. It used to be like it would always go to default make holes, and it was like, I don't want to make holes. But they still, when you paint the textures, they don't keep your settings between brush strokes, which is really, I mean, between, like when you click away and then you click back onto it, they don't give you the brush that you had set up before. They just give you the same default brush. It's like, no, give me the brush I painstakingly set up. So as you can see, what we've got here is a little bit of a sand situation, like up above there's sand. We're going to go ahead and polish that just a touch. It's not going to be too challenging. We're not trying to be particularly amazing at this, but we do want to make it feel like there's a reason for there to be like a little bit of sand there. So we're just kind of creating a little hill, and then we're going to have the sand on the hill. This is not the best brush shape for it. So we're going to go over to smooth, and then we're just going to smooth out some of that noise that we just created because it's a little bit noisy. And one of the tricks to creating a decent height map is to make sure your edges don't look really, really artificial. And the easiest way to do that is just to smooth them a little bit more than you might think you need to. But unfortunately for us, that means that we don't really get the kind of hill that we want. So we're just going to go back to set height. And I believe we can choose a height, shift and left click to sample a height. Yeah. So with that, we can actually go through and create a hill that doesn't have jaggies on it. Like that. That's good. Yeah. So now we'll paint the elements that we'd like to paint. So the sand should obviously go mostly on the basin where there is place for the sand to settle, and then we'll have rocks where there's no sand. This will probably have to be redone. It's pretty awful in spots. We'll redo it later, though. For now, we're just going to work on this one little tiny stretch. All right, so now let's put in some of the heavier sand just to break up the brightness, because it's just a little too bright at the moment. And it's easy to forget where the surface is because the surface turns invisible when you're above it, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and add in the rocks now. So what we're going to do is we're going to make these edges feel like they're on purpose by really playing them up as rocks, like so. A couple of them need to be duskier with some sand pouring down. So we're going to leave those in place too. Yeah, that's more or less what I had in mind. So now, if you want to see how that looks in game, let's take a look. There's a little bit of a jaggy that I didn't expect. The silhouette here is a little more forced than I'd like. You see that rock right above my head here? This guy? That guy right there. You see how that's creating a really obvious jaggy? We're going to just move that rock a little bit. I don't even think that's one of the rocks I placed. I think that's just an old rock that's now being revealed because of how we just set this up. But you can see how that doesn't feel too shabby in terms of feeling like it is a place that might exist. The cliff edge is still a little bit forced, but hopefully you can't polish everything in the game. You'll go off the wall. But we do want to make sure that the backdrops don't feel too iffy. So that floating rock, we're going to move it. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with this, and this is a good place for random divers to drop all their random crap. So the question that we were doing, one of these rocks, this guy, it's just floating in the middle of nowhere. We're going to just delete him. We can put him back in later. So now let's go and put back in our weighted platform and decorate this area so that it feels a little bit more natural. And you can see this area is a lot bigger than it might seem if you're... This is one of those things that people never, at least a lot of people, especially indie devs, never really get a strong grasp on how large a place is. And that's true of me too. I am an indie dev after all. It's very easy to create a place which is way bigger than you need. And then be like, how can I fill this place up? When the answer is you shouldn't have a place that big. Still, I think this is okay. It is quite large, but it's not so large that it's going to cause us any grief. So I think it's going to be okay because I don't need to fill it up entirely. I just need to make sure that you understand that there were people here and they were doing stuff. So we'll just put in some tilty bits here, make sure that they are going into the ground. They are. And move some of these up. Oh, I see. It's 90 degrees off. So, let's put that on the other one. Thank you. So one of the annoying things we've got is a lack of ropes. We're going to need ropes. We're going to need ropes for everything, everywhere, all the time. Everything is lashed down underwater. Otherwise, you're asking for trouble. But I don't really know how the ropes should look. That's something we're going to have to try and think about, and we're going to have to create rope meshes that are widely useful. And I think that the answer is probably... so the problem is that when we lash something down, you've got to tie it to the surface, right? Now with our table over here, you can barely see it now because it's covered in junk, but we actually have like mounting points on the sides that we're tying the ropes to. That's nice, but it does rather limit how we can arrange our ropes, which is a definite problem if we plan to ever put anything in ropes. So normally what I would consider would be to do the opposite and make the ropes object-centric instead of platform-centric. But then where are you tying the ropes? Well, we could just add like random fasteners. So the idea there is wherever the rope happens to stop, there is a fastener there. And if it doesn't make sense for the object, who cares? The other idea is that we could add segmented ropes. Now, segmented ropes are typically skinned meshes, like your body, or like an arm, because as they bend, the rope bends, right? The other option is generated meshes, but both of those options are quite expensive. We don't want to have 12,000 generated meshes. These ropes are generated, but I wouldn't want to have 1 million of them. This is more than enough. So those are both bad options, but we could create a segment by having the rope end at a knot, like, a tie fastening knot, or something else like a pressure winch or something, and then have it come out the other end as a different rope object. And that way you could tie that rope object to whatever fastener you're using, and then the two rope objects butt up in a rope bundle of some kind. The problem there is that it's going to be really obvious that there's a bend. It's going to be like, oh, a bend. But we could create a couple of different options. Let's go ahead and try it. Let's go ahead and create some ropes and give that a shot. So if we go over into meshes, there should already be a cables. Yeah, there it is. But I don't want to use the cables. I actually want to use a new ropes file. I don't believe I have a ropes file. I have rocks. All right, I'm going to actually switch over to Phoenix Wright for a second while I set up Blender. And then a new file. Save it as ropes. And now I'll bring you back without accidentally stopping the stream. That'll be nice. All right, so here's our ropes file. It's full of ropes, as you can see. So the good news about ropes is that you don't have to model them. Not exactly. You have two basic options for ropes. You can either extrude them by creating a rope mesh and then just control right clicking or control left clicking, one of those. Or you can create a path and then populate the path. We're going to use a path section today, the path approach today. The only problem is that I'm not sure it gets a UV map. So we're going to have to test that. We're going to have to see whether or not that works. Because if there's no UV map, we're going to be in trouble. I'll have to like manually create UV maps. Ideally, what I want is a repeating UV map, which I can do using a repeated object mapping, but I can't do it using a thickness mapping. You'll see. I'll show you in a minute here. So if we create a Bezier curve, what we can do is we can go down into the curve and we can tell it to have a thickness. Here it is. So you can see that we can create like, oh, that was weird. I'm used to Unity, and every time I come into Blender from Unity, I try and use a Unity motion, and it does something random in Blender every time. So here we've got the object, which you can see is just a flat like tapeworm thing. I think we can bevel instead of extrude. Yeah, there it is. So this is the method you'd use to create a rope, if this was good enough for you. The problem is it may not have a UV map. We're going to find out. If we go over into the materials here, there we are, add a new material, we'll call it rope. And we're going to have to add a texture for our rope. I'm actually going to switch you back over to Phoenix Wright for a second, because this is always popping up in my main images folder, which has all of my work crap in it. Base color, image texture, open. Oh, you actually opened in the correct directory for once. I'm shocked. Maybe it's been a while. In that case, I can bring you back. There's no reason to worry about that too much. Textures. Now we have to decide what kind of texture we're looking to get. It doesn't really matter as long as it has the sort of thing we're looking for. Colored band, that should be enough. So if we switch over into a rendering option, you can see that this has a UV map. Hooray. All right, good. So now the question is this UV map stretched or is it repeated? If we switch over to colored band vert, we should get the other direction. Oh, it's stretched. Let's see if there's an option in the Bezier curve to make it so that it's not stretched, because I don't want a rope that's stretched like that. Texture space, auto texture space. When transforming an object. Oh, that's interesting. I'm just trying to figure out how to get this to properly... Blender, Bezier. I don't need any more heat right now, although it was quite a day. It's been snowing for 2 days, which is not really what it's supposed to do in late spring. We didn't get any snow over the winter. We got plenty of snow in the spring. So a Blender, Bezier, what's it called? Bevel? Is it called Bevel? Bevel, UV, repeat. Adding a texture map to a beveled curve or path. I really want to apply mapping to a curve object for a rope or pipe that has a repeated pattern. There must be a simple way. Yes, you can simply toggle use UV for mapping options in the property editor as of 5 years, 11 months ago. Seems unlikely. Let's take a look here. So they've replaced they've actually removed the one option. This tab is identical, except for the one option that they tell me to click. Brilliant. No, none of that's working. None of that's working. I don't think any of this shit's working. This seems completely broken. And then their other option is to turn it into a mesh, which, what a waste. So let's see if we can find one from this decade. Why is it not giving me the date on some of these? You can UV map a curve. Look here. Well, I just linked back to the thing that didn't work. Great. And there's a link from 2003. I guess it's not. Jojo Jet says, do you have to convert it to a mesh? I mean, I can do it if I convert it to a mesh. That's pretty easy. But it's like really stupid. I don't want to convert these all to meshes because I'm going to create hundreds of these. And I might have to edit them later and duplicate them. And if they're a mesh, I can't do that. The whole point of using Blender is that I don't have to worry about destructive workflows. Let's go ahead and try and create a custom bevel that has the correct workflow on it. So if we create a cylinder, kaboom, we can take a look at the cylinder's UV mapping. There it is. UV editor. So if we go in here and we take a look, you can see that this has a fairly clean UV map. It's got some faces that we don't need, so we're just going to delete those. Kabow! And kablappy. And what we're left with is a perfectly serviceable UV map, which we can simply go to the individual origins and then click here and then scale. Oh, no, not individual or active element. Why is there no active element option? I'll go for 2D cursor then. So if we go to the 2D cursor and then we move the 2D cursor to 1, and then we can scale Y to, there we are, perfect. So that's a pretty straightforward setup. I'm not actually 100% sure that it's the correct direction. It might be sideways, whatever, it's fine. So if we then move that out of the way a little bit, more than that, we should be able to tell this to use a bevel taper object like this one. Didn't take. This is something that I'm not sure. I recently noticed this no longer worked. It used to be that you could actually just select an object, but you can't anymore, and I'm not sure why. Why are none of these objects... Maybe I do have to use objects. What a pain in the patookus. So it looks like we are going to have to just live with the really shitty UV mapping. I'll deal with it later. It's really quite sad. This is just pathetic. I'm sure there is a way to do it. Blender is not being helpful. So we're going to switch that back over to the one that doesn't look like shit. There we are. And it is black, but we'll just live with that for now because this is just a demo for purposes of getting it set up. So we're going to need to have a couple of rope segments that tie into a knot of some kind, a rope knot. So what we're going to want to do is just create a rope knot mesh. That's going to be something that will definitely be a mesh and not just a set of curves. But we can start it up as a set of curves, so we'll just bring it in here. And when we bring this in, we're going to want to bevel it. But unfortunately, it's not letting me just Control B to bevel it. So, oh, no quick favorites. Great. Why did it clear my quick favorites again? They were working 2 days ago. I bet it's because I'm in a mode that, a curve editing mode that doesn't count, maybe? I don't know. Segments subdivide. Thank you. There we go. This should be enough for us to create a basic sort of knot. No, individual origins, please. Don't know if you can hear that, but someone's industrial strength fire alarm is going off. Probably one of the 14 million car shops on my block. Basically, we're trying to create a coil. Now that I think about it, there are easier ways to do it. So we're going to delete this. Plaf. Just delete it entirely. And we're going to add just a plane because there's no option to add a line. And then we're going to just select pieces on this plane and collapse them. Oh, look, there it is. It works. It's fine. As long as it's not gone. So now what we've got is a line. And to turn the line into a spiral, we have a lot of options. Did I do this dumb? I did this dumb. We're going to add in a circle. There we are. A circle can be turned into a spiral relatively quickly, relatively easily. Bring that down to, say, 12. We're going to want to get rid of some of these really dumb... Drop it. How do I make this go away? Don't you just right-click and tell it to... What happened to the option to get rid of this? Did I open up the wrong version of Blender or something? What's going on? There was always an option to delete. Now it's just giving me options like split area. Oh, great. Now I've got 2 of them. Join areas. Okay, so apparently I'm only allowed to join areas in specific ways. I don't know. Whatever. No, fuck you. Fuck you. Thank you. Just getting right back into my swearing. Well, the idea here is we're going to rip one of these seams. Boom. And then we're just going to rearrange the entire setup. So I got that buzzing behind me from someone's fire alarm. It's really a little distracting. Connected only, please. Oh, I ripped the vertex out? without... That doesn't make any sense. Okay, whatever. If we add a skin operator, boom, and then we can add a subdivide. Boom, and then we can add an array. Put the array up at the top. And it's going to be unfortunately, it looks like the array modifier does not combine the elements. We'll have to do that ourselves later. That's fine. Let's create a higher count. 4. There we go. And obviously, this is not the right visual. So what we're going to do is we're going to thicken them tremendously. Which I think we can do by using Control A. Yeah. Ooh, it got too thick. So if they get too thick, they explode. Then we'll go ahead and push it like that. And then we'll just duplicate it and rotate it 180 degrees. There we are. And we've got something that looks kind of ropey, right? Good enough. Now we'll go over here and we'll hit apply. And then we can just tell it to get rid by distance. And what we'll have is twisty. Why? It's got some twistiness to it. That's a little weird. It's because there's 8 million roots, isn't there? We'll go ahead and mark this as the root. There we are. Better. So that's going to be the basic shape. We're going to want to go ahead and actually finish that off and then mark it as smooth. And that's going to be the basic shape. It's far too large, but it's going to be a reasonable setup for us. The only issue now is that there's no UV mapping at all. So what we're going to want to do in order to do the UV mapping is probably the best bet would be to project from view, which is not really a great way to do it. But what it'll do is it'll give us a really quick and easy, well, you know what, that's really going to not work. I guess the easiest thing to do would be to take a point on this mesh, unwrap it, and then over here arrange it how we want it. That seems fine. And then we can just select the entirety and tell it to unwrap from active quads. So that's one of the two things, and you can see that it's a little bit silly, but it's better than what we had before. The other one is down here. We'll go ahead and unwrap here, and then we will there we are. I don't know why it didn't work the first time. Follow active quads. And now you can see what we've got is this huge wingy thingy, which is, I mean, silly, but who cares? It's fine. I really hope that fire alarm stops. It's really getting on my nerves. I'm not going to worry too much about it. We're just going to go ahead and call that fine. We'll come back to it later if we have more specific needs. If we switch it over to being the material in question, rope, you can see how we've got this kind of setup. Well, that's the same. That's correct. It may look silly, but that's because this material looks silly everywhere. If we switch it out for a material that's more in line with what we want, you can see that it's not quite right. It's got some 90-degree stuff going on in certain spots that we're going to need to fix. But it's passable for now. It'll work for now. We don't want to waste too much time on this stuff. Anyway, obviously, if we're going to be using something this scale for our ropes, then we're going to want to make this bad boy much, much larger, or this bad boy much, much smaller, or both. So let's go ahead and apply that scale change. And then over here, we're going to go ahead and move this into position. And then this is going to be our new rope, which is going to need to be thicker. Yeah, like that. David Goder says, what mesh are we making? We're making a bunch of rope meshes. Pardon the very, very primitive materials. But basically we need ways to tie things down, and we're going to use some ropes to do it. So the first thing we're going to do is create ropes that can go over the top of whatever we need them to go over the top of. So a hoop. Let's go ahead and create a hoop. So I guess what we should probably do is duplicate this just in case. Stick it off to the side. But it's not really anything complicated, so if we want to create a hoop, we can just subdivide and then move this middle portion up. That's weird. Why didn't the subdivision... It looks like these are different size. I would have hoped to have the setup be similar, but whatever. So in order to create a hoop, we'll just bring it up like this, and then we'll stretch that way out like that. And then we'll extrude on the x-axis here, and then extrude on the x-axis here. But obviously we don't want the hoop to be that pronounced, so we're going to go ahead and move these up a little bit and then make them a little bit softer. And we're going to keep that alarm going in the background for as long as possible. So then the idea is when you have something like this, it'll tie into one of these so that you can add another segment in. This is still too large, so let's go ahead and reduce it down a little bit more. So that way we can create ropes without having to have calculated ropes. We don't have to simulate all of our ropes into existence. We can just fake it, and that's going to be good enough because these are never going to be touched. They're going to be just prop ropes. We're going to need some kind of straight rope. It shouldn't be too straight because that would feel a little bit fakey. So what we'll do is we'll come on over here and just kind of turn this into, oh, you know what? We should really put this on a specific point. Let's go ahead and move this back. You can see that one end of the rope is exactly at 1. See, it's exactly clean on 1. The other end of the rope is not, though. So if it's a 45-degree angle at 1, that should be fine. But it's a little bit short and lacking. So what we're going to do is we're going to move it to maybe 3 and then over 1. But at that point, I'm not sure it's at a 45-degree angle. So what we're going to do is duplicate this and then rotate it 180 degrees and see whether or not it is properly at a good angle. Yeah, look, there is... It's not on the same plane. Did I rotate this somehow? I must have rotated it not on the z-axis. There we are. So you can see we can sort of get the rope going like this. Jojo Jet says he was playing around with Blender and he can't figure out how to UV map a curve. It's such a glaring hole. Yeah. I can't really say I'm very happy about Blender ever. But it is free. Let's start naming these. This is going to be rope 45 curve, 45 gentle. This is going to be rope hoop small. This is going to be rope knot. What are these kinds of knots called? These spiral knots? They actually have a name, but I don't remember them. It's not actually a knot anyway. We're totally faking it. Now let's go ahead and create a larger hoop. So basically, we can't really scale these because they will look wrong. So we are going to have to actually create like a series of sizes. That's not too shabby, though. We can scale them while we're in Blender. So here we've got a problem where these edges are not properly aligned on a 0. So we're going to just bring that back. And then why did that flatten the rope? So I scaled it to 0. Oh, I want to move it to 0 without scaling it to 0. David Goder says, is it done in other softwares? You know, I haven't tried to do it in too many other software, but it is something that should be easy, and it's not. So that's my problem. Also, my problem is that I want to move this to the 3D cursor, and I can't scale it because it causes damage, but I can just manually move it like this, in which case I might as well just manually type in -4. And then over here we'll type in 4. No, that's 44. 4. And then we're going to want to just adjust these so they feel a little bit more natural. Deep, beep, 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 beep. UVs generally go on polygons. Well, yes, but these are polygons. They're just polygons that I don't want to cement. I don't want to have to bake everything down into a final mesh in order to get them into the game engine, because if I do that, then I have to change something later. I have to go back in, I have to rebake them, I have to readjust them. So I'd prefer to do it non-destructively. And that way, if I do have to make a change, there's no issues where I need to create it again from scratch. I can just go ahead and use it as is. So let's go ahead and call this rope hoop large, and then we'll go into Unity and just sort of put these on and see whether or not we're even headed in vaguely the right direction. Beep, 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 beep. I don't even know if you can hear that, but it is really loud, and it's been going on for ever since I started complaining about it. So obviously these are much too large at the moment, but that's not a big deal. We just have to figure out what the scale is. That's probably too small, but we'll find out. Yeah, I would like to be able to use generated UVs. Unfortunately for me, that does not appear to be an option in Blender, which I can't call particularly brilliant choice on their part. You know, if we put them in the object space, it'll be perfect. So here's tank long, drop it in. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. There we are. Now it's an object space. But you can see that the scaling is a little bit strange, and that's because the scaling on the tank is strange. So now that we've put them in object space, we take them out of object space. And then we try and set these up to be a uniform scale. Where'd it go? What the hell? Oh, I just turned it off. Brilliant. I'm good like that. Oh, and as you can see, they are cleverly importing cameras and all sorts of stuff, which should never be the default. I wish they didn't do that. There we go. Not that this is going to remain a Blender file, but it's something where it would be good to have it as close to right as possible. And you can see that what we've got here is a set of curves that is more or less okay. If we could make it look like a rope, then that would be particularly nice, right? Let's go ahead and just take some of these ropes out. We've got, where are these called? Okay, so even though I called it rope hoop large, I stupidly named the Bezier curve rope hoop large and not the mesh. What did I call this? Spiral knot. All right, come back on over. It should just update. Yeah. All right, so this is more or less how I want it to be. And what I can do is just start to try and set it up so that it feels right. If you bring over that rope 45 small, if I were to use the snapping, I should be able to get it to snap together just fine as long as I stick to 45-degree increments. So, well, there we are. So there we have a vertex snapped element, and then we can just duplicate that rope 45 small, put it inside the first rope 45 small, and then move it to the end of the rope. Okay, I see what the problem here is. So this rope 45 small has a critical error. Now it doesn't. So the problem was that it was rotating around a point that wasn't its end point, because the end point is absolutely critical if we want to actually line these things up. Another problem we've got is that the snapping here is in world space and not an object space, which means that, wow, that is absolutely not what I told you to do, Unity, which means that I can't, what the fuck? This is probably fixed in the newest version of Unity because it's such a weird and glaring problem that they introduced. Hooray. Who fucking ray. So now if we were to move this across and then rotate it 45, we should be able to snap it in. Okay. So you can sort of see where we're going with this, right? So let's go ahead and create a longer rope segment. So we're just going to grab this rope segment, and then we're going to move it aside for a second. I'm going to move the other one aside. This one's going to be rope long, or rope medium run, rope run medium. And it basically it's the same setup, except for we are going to have the rope go back to being straight. Like that. There we are. So that should be easy enough. We'll just go back into Unity here. If I use half a bevel instead of a full bevel, I mean, I could use half a bevel and then mirror it on an axis as long as I keep them on the same axis. So let's go ahead and take a look. If we do it on half a bevel, twist mode, minimum, okay, that's fine. Here it is, fill mode, half. So if we do it on half a bevel, I need to find an option to generate it more. Where are you seeing the option to do this? Because if I can make this work, it's probably fine, but I don't see an option to generate a repeating UV. Sorry, I don't see the option. You'll have to paste it into chat or something if I'm just not seeing it, because I don't see any differences in how it works. Anyway, we should now have a rope run medium, and we can just stick it into place with a simple snap. I can apply a texture in the node editor. Well, I mean, I did that. This has a texture. The problem is that you're probably using a node editor that uses object coordinates automatically for the UVs instead of one that actually uses the UVs. That's one of the defaults in Blender. You can apply a node texture to an object and it uses world space or object space coordinates instead of texture UVs. That won't carry over into the game engine. Now I can, in the game engine, create texture UVs out of object coordinates. But the problem is these objects are twisting in 3 dimensions. So if I do that, we're going to end up with a UV map that doesn't go along the object, but instead just kind of is mapped on top of the object. Because this is not twisted properly. That's why the UV map is necessary. Now here we've got a little bit of an issue where these 3 objects are not on the same edge, but that's not a big deal. We can just drop this in. Fuck you. We can simply unpack everything completely because Unity broke their setup. And then drop this in, and then we can simply rotate this on local space. Yoink. And that's not going to be too shabby. All we really need to do now is have a way to tie it to some kind of fastener. So for that, we're going to start off with this spiral knot, and then we're going to figure out how to make that. Thank you. Figure out how to make that spiral knot work for tying it to some kind of hoop. We don't have a hoop, so we have to make one. A latch. So let's go ahead and just do that. Yeah, David Goder says that the only option is baking, and I think he's right. But baking is such a destructive operation, so even after I bake it, I've got to go back in and map the textures out myself, do the UV mapping myself, and I don't know that those are going to be the final meshes, so wasting all that time on it seems like a huge pain in the ass. I may go for a very subtle metal cable look instead of a rope, just because I think I can get away with using world space coordinates for that. We'll find out. Anyway, we need a clamp, so we're going to start with a cube. Going to add a new material here. We're going to go ahead and call it metal. Metal. And we're just going to make sure that it's roughly the right size for what we're trying to accomplish, which means that this is obviously much too big. Trying to decide which, I guess it doesn't matter. This should be fine. And then all we're going to do is create a hoop. Which we can do simply by arranging this properly. I didn't want to do it like that, dang it. And then what we'll do is we'll delete. And then we'll extrude down. And then we'll simply skin it. A little bit thick on the skinning. Let's go ahead and take it in just a touch. And then we will just add in a subsurface. We're not going to add in a subsurface. We're going to do that manually for reasons that will become obvious eventually. All right, so now if we apply the modifier and then we just join it in here, we can then bevel. And if we only bevel these edges, we won't duplicate massive amounts of geometry on the inside. But you can see that we do have a problem here with these particular hoop elements going a little bit off the wall. Just going to delete those edges. And then we'll do our cutting again here. That's not too shabby. Blender add-on or custom Unity shader would work better. I don't know. I can't imagine how to make a custom Unity shader that looks like a rope in this situation, because it has to work off of some sort of coordinates. So it's either going to use world coordinates or object coordinates, and in both cases, the rope is kind of twisting through space at random. That's why I'm a little bit annoyed that I can't do it in Blender, because I can't really do it in Unity either. I'm going to fake it. I'm going to try to fake it, but it's something that would be better if I didn't have to fake it. We're going to go ahead and cut this in half. There's no reason to have it set up like this. There we go. Just add in everybody's favorite mirror. Boom. Now to make this a little bit better, we're going to mark it as smooth and then set it up with a auto smooth. Here it is. Boom. And that'll give it some chunkiness, but not so much that it's annoying. Just adjust that up a little bit. Oh, too high. Okay, so that's not going to work. That's fine. There. So now we've got a hook of some kind, but I think it needs a little bit more spice. So let's go ahead and create a little bit more spice. And I think the easiest way to do that will be to duplicate this edge here. We don't even have to duplicate it, do we? We can slide it and then cut it. Yeah, like that. And then we can just adjust it a touch and then create some more spice. Turn on clipping. And then bevel some of this. Kaboom. Now we're just going to smart unwrap it and call it something, rope hook. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually look. You could use a stylized glass cable and avoid the problem entirely. I mean, yeah, it is definitely sci-fi, but I want the ropes to feel old-fashioned. I kind of want the feeling like this is all half-assed. I want the feeling like no matter how advanced the science gets and how advanced the tools get, the people are still kind of just doing whatever. I think that will be the best. But for this, I'm going to go ahead and look it up here. Quay rope. Quay, is that the word I'm looking for? I believe so, yes. Good. If we look at images, we should be able to see... So the hooks in question are not hooks at all. Okay, this makes more sense. We're not going to use hooks. I just wasted everybody's time. Brilliant! We are, however, going to basically use the same setup. It's just not going to be hooks. So... it's going to be a bulb because that's what they actually are in real life, and that makes a whole lot more sense. So we could create like a circle and all that jazz, but I think we'll just duplicate this bad boy. And then we'll try and cut him a little bit so that he's a little bit rounder. Can I bevel here? No, not yet. So we're going to have to extrude up and then bevel. I think we're going to have to bevel again in a minute, but that's okay. You know what? It would be better if it was a circle. Let's go ahead and start over. Just put in a UV sphere with very low values, like, say, 12 and 8. And then shrink it down. Basically, I'm looking at the size of the rope, and I'm trying to make sure this ball doesn't get too stupidly small, which means that obviously I'm going to have to increase this. Not a big deal. Bring it back around to the 3D cursor here. No, don't type things over in a wrong window. That would be dumb. So we've got this down here, which, nope, don't delete the vertices, just the faces. We're just going to move this because it's a little bit too deep. There we are. And then up here, we're just going to extrude straight down. Now the result needs to be deleted. And that's more or less how they look if they are balls. Some of them aren't balls. Some of them are like barrels. Some of them have like down-pointed hooks and stuff. Some of them are just posts. But this should be functional enough. It's minimalist, and that's kind of important for me because it's not supposed to stand out. They're just supposed to be basically invisible. There we are. Don't know what buttons I was pressing, but it wasn't doing what I was trying to get it to do. There we go. So just delete half of those. And then we will, again, unwrap. But we're going to want to mark them as smooth. Yeah, that's actually not too shabby. So it's not really a rope hook, is it? It's going to be a rope bollard. Sometimes you have to know what the keywords are, and it's never obvious. All right, so we need the rope bollard here, and unfortunately, there is no rope bollard because it's no longer mapped properly. We'll just choose it. Chapow, there's our rope bollard. Obviously, we don't want it to be rope. We're going to want it to be some kind of metal. I think a world metal flat might be perfect. We can change the world metal flat. It's a little bit aggressive at the moment. It's using some really, really loud noise as the main texture, which is obviously overdone. We don't need that much noise. All of the blue noises are far louder than you might think. I'm not really sure what our best bet is. Is that normal? Okay, so the normal is actually probably the problem. Can I get the normal depth to be like 0.1? Even that's a little bit too much. And then maybe 0.1 is better, but this is still too much. We'll work on it. We'll get it to work a little bit better. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and call that okay for now. There are a lot of things wrong with it. First off, it doesn't have a texture, which is giving us issues. But we'll have to figure it out on our own later. Clearly, it was just a stand-in at the moment, so it's not really supposed to be anything significant. We're going to want to add a box collider. No, I don't know what I just added, but that wasn't it. There we go. And we're going to put this somewhere. We don't have a rope that ties around it yet, so that's going to be our next step. We're going to need to have a rope of that size. So to do that, it's pretty simple. We're just going to create a hoop around the bollard, which we can do by duplicating the bollard and then punching it out. And then over here, we can simply go in, drag it down, and then mark it as skinned, and then mark it as subdivided. And it's basically the same thing that we had before, except that we need to do a little bit of work so that it is, so it feels tied rather than just like a hoop. So to do that, we're actually going to go ahead and bake it down. And mark it as a rope in the materials. We'll go ahead and just clip some of this. I believe it should already be partly clipped. No, okay. It must have combined them for some reason. So we'll cut that. And then we will just UV unwrap smart. And then what we're going to want to do is, what? Oh, that's just the weird UV mapping. That's fine for now. We'll fix it later. What we're going to want to do is simply offset these by using proportional editing to create a sense of being like a spiral. And then we're just going to duplicate this. And the second one, we're going to move it up. And then this. Well, I'm trying to think about the best way to do this. And I think the best way to do it is actually to delete this. And then use bridge edge loops. What we really would like to do is tuck the bollard down inside itself. And I think the best place to do that would be maybe here. So if we were to grab this chunk, we can just control click. Let's go ahead and... I really shouldn't do it the way I'm doing it, but that's fine. If we just control click, no, control right click, there we are. We just control right click, we should be able to adjust this. Let's make sure it's in vaguely the right spot before we do. I manually extruded that time because it's kind of important. And then we'll bring it down. Pow. And then we'll just kind of soften our manual bits. And the only thing left for us to do is to have this come out in a way that we can connect to on another rope. But I think the way we're going to do that is we're actually just going to tuck it in. There we go. And that way we can plug the rope in wherever we want. The last thing we've got to do is we've got to mark a crease on the bottom of the rope all the way up. And then unwrap it. There we go. You can see we've got this kind of dog turd looking thing. It's pretty common. And the only question is whether or not it's in the right direction. I don't know. It doesn't matter. We'll figure it out later. So this is going to be part of the bollard, I think. We'll just combine the two. Does the bollard still have any? Yeah, so we'll apply the mirror, and then we'll just join them together. So we come back over into Unity. We're going to have to apply another material to the bollard. So I think we were using just default rope. I don't think we have just a default rope. That must be inherited from Blender. We'll go ahead and use our own rope for a second here. We'll figure out what we want the rope to be in the long run. We can create a material, map it properly, all that jazz. Obviously, the spiral cable is not a bad choice. but it's a little bit too bright. Let's go ahead and get the spiral cable, duplicate it. Let's call it a rope spiral. And then we can just drop that rope spiral onto whatever we feel needs rope spiraling. And later on, we can change exactly how it works. So we don't need this loop, delete it. So the rope spiral is obviously not spiraled as much as it should be in order to make this work. But it's got a situation where down here it's like super spirally. So this is the sort of situation where there's a lot of work that needs to be done in making this suck a little bit less. Either way, we can just up the number of spirals a little bit to like 30. And we're going to want to make it so that there is no color emission. This is not a glowing rope. And instead the albedo is going to be that spiral, which I think it'll be easier to just go down and track manually, because I don't remember what I called it, but it should be right here. Diagmask, I think that's what it was. Diagmask, there we are. You can see that it's black, which is obviously a little bit too black. What we really want is something that's a little bit less aggressively black. So we may go in and create our own map for that. Yeah. Why don't we go ahead and duplicate this diagonal mask and call it a normal mask. And then we'll use that as the normal in the rope spiral. And then we'll go with no albedo, or maybe something soft. No, blue noise is not soft. So this makes it really smooth. We're going to need to figure out like lots of other ways to make this suck a little bit less. For now, why don't I go ahead and add in a noise map as the detail map. And then we can pull this way, way back. That's not back far enough. And then we can turn down the smoothness. Now, I don't think this is very good, but it is better than what I had a second ago, and that's the main thing that we need to worry about. Let's see how it looks in the game. I should probably just move the player into the second room. Problem is the second room isn't at quite the same height as the first room, so my player moving needs to be a little bit more careful. Ah, well, there's our floating tank, which we're obviously going to deal with as soon as we figured out this rope shit. Doesn't look like rope, not even vaguely. For some reason, this is not properly smoothed. I think I need to stop taking shortcuts with this particular one. Let's go ahead and do this the right way. Oh, well. Still looks terrible, but it no longer looks strange in terms of it being organic. I don't really know that this is going to be good enough, but you can see that it's going to add quite a bit of flair if we can get it to be even vaguely reasonable. That's the hope. So if I were going to try to do something else, let's start to rearrange stuff. Let's go ahead and see whether or not this can be set up to suck a little bit less. So here we've got a large tank, which I think what we're going to want to do is kind of nudge it in between these two tanks, in between these two tables, rather. I don't want it to be embedded in a table there. There we are. And then we can have a rope that comes around that tank. So if we grab this rope, duplicate it. Oh, that didn't duplicate shit. Duplicate it. You can see that it's not large enough for this super big tank. So we've got two options. We can shrink the tank or we can grow the rope. If we grow the rope, we're going to have all of the ropes in this chain be the exact same scale, which isn't too hard as long as we make it an easy to remember scale. 1.5 is not enough. 2. Don't scale it, rotate it. So if we rotate it like this, trying to figure out if it fits. I think it fits. So if we do it like this, we do have an issue where this little tail here is going to be a little bit challenging to get to work. I wonder if I put a bollard right there, if that'll work. So if I duplicate this bollard, put it inside this hoop, set it to size 1, and then scale it on over there. Now the bollard and the rope being the same scale are a problem. This is not going to be super nice, but if I were to do that, you can see how the rope kind of pops out the far side in a way that doesn't really make sense, but we can move the whole bollard. Now we have some issues with the bollards and such showing up underneath because this is a very thin little tank or table. That's something we can deal with. For example, this rope here, I don't think anybody's ever going to notice it, but we can always cover it up with something. So we're going to continue to try and set this up. We do not need the cube. There's no foundations here. This little pallet thing, I think it's going to go pretty well as stacked right next to the first one over here in kind of a collapsed sort of way. These air tanks, I think that we're going to want to put a bunch of them in a row. And then use a tie-down method to make it look decent. So this table here is the pallet short, and that's the scuba tank. Drop it on the pallet short. And we can zero out all of the rotations so that it'll line up perfectly on the pallet. Oh, come on. It'll line up perfectly if Unity can get its shit together. There you are. Now you can see that there is a hook on these, specifically intended to go on the side of a boat, because that's what I stole it from. But I think it'll go just fine in a setup like this. The only thing is it doesn't make sense for it to be stapled straight into the metal here. It would make more sense if it had a some kind of underlying mounting element, like a little tube or something, but that's fine. We'll deal with that later. For now, we'll just dock them in. The snapping on these is really bad. We'll just do it manually. And then what we're going to do is hide some of these tanks. I think one more tank so it doesn't feel quite so artificial. And then what we can do is we can create a tank and delete the loop. And we can have these just kind of scattered down here. Because there's no reason that you would ever need a scuba tank, it's okay that you can't interact with them. We can use these to hide some of the more egregious seamage going on here. We don't want to be too obvious about it. We also want to change out some of these textures. These are a little bit too rocky, so we're going to sort of sand it up a little bit. We're going to want to turn off the selection outline because it's really, really obnoxious when you're trying to paint. I'm not sure why they set that up like that, but that's okay. It's not really an outline if the whole thing turns orange. That's a little bit more sandy. Now we've got some other random stuff kind of happening here that doesn't make any sense just yet because I just pasted some shit in. For example, these jars hiding under the ground. I think what we can do, we've already got some jars. We don't want 1,000,000 jars, but let's go ahead and put in a few more up here on the top layer. I'm getting super hungry. And you can see that they're not perfectly aligned. They don't have to be perfect, but we do want them to be vaguely on the right surface. All right, so there should be some, there's some other stuff, but we didn't get it because we copied some stuff without bothering to check and see what was inside. So we just got like a bunch of random crap. Let's grab a couple more random things. So here's the palette that we copied, but you can see there's other stuff in this palette that we didn't get. Specifically, we didn't get any of these. We should have, though. There's got to be a sack in here, right? There it is. It's just hidden under the surface. That's fine. The sack is going to make up a good chunk of our filler here. Now these sacks don't have a flabby version that I can make a flabby version, but they aren't one right now. So that means that we're going to want to make sure that it doesn't look too fake when they droop over the side and then they never actually droop. The good news is that it's underwater, and it turns out that things don't droop quite as well underwater unless they're really heavy. So assuming these sacks are not full of like lead or concrete, them not sagging is not incredibly unusual, but we would like to have them have a sag option. So we're going to go ahead and create 2 more meshes. Let's open up the sack folder, the sack file. And where are our sacks? There they are. So right now we're doing something strange. Go back into object mode. Here it is. So this is the sack we're using. We're just going to create some saggy versions. So and there's going to be a sack sag B. And all we really want to do is use a brush, or not a brush, but a thing, and just kind of pull them down. You can see that this is not quite as good as it needs to be. Just a little bit of a sag on that one, and on this one we'll go the other way. I think the easiest thing to do would be to actually add another loop into the middle here. And then we can just create a sag. We're going to go ahead and have this corner do a little bit of something. There we go. Save. This sag doesn't look good enough yet. Let's go ahead and put another loop in here as well, just because it'll be a little bit clearer. And then we will have this do a little bit of something. All right. I don't like how thin it is, so let's go ahead and beef it up a little bit here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and save that. Close this, go back over here into Blender. Habs contains a lot of stuff that's not sacks, so it takes a little while to import. We can just switch out this sack for the sack sag B, and you can see how immediately it becomes a little bit more natural looking. And up here we can switch this out for the sack sag A. Now in practice what we should do is we should have a sack depositor, some kind of thing that does this sort of stuff semi-automatically. And there are ways to do that. If I care enough about putting down a kabajillion sacks, I'll think about it. But if it's just these guys, then we don't need to worry about it. This is something we can do manually. There we go. Now that we've got a couple of different sacks, we really get the sense that they are kind of flopping. The textures on them are very, very temporary. We don't have anything serious going on there. And there is one more spot that isn't very well filled over here. I think we're going to go ahead and just put another sack there. Maybe a rope. All right, let's see how that looks. I forgot to move the player. I'll need to add a little bit more trees over here. This was actually the back entrance the first time I planned it out, but it works better as the first entrance. All right, so I think we're going to have to add some stuff. I don't want to add anything that glows, because the only thing that should glow should be the interactable object. But right now that top element looks a little bit barren. Maybe I'll just sack it up. So you can sort of see how this is very much a place where people are trying to do stuff. And I think that's pretty good in terms of how it should feel. I'm not actually sure about... I mean, all of these assets are a little bit temporary, which means that it's not really a great fit in general. But if we add some more ropes and some more stuff, I think we shouldn't have a problem having something that feels pretty good. So let's do that. Thank you, Unity. You are so helpful to continue to do something for 15 seconds after I've lit up on my finger. If we just put these up here, they're quite large. little too large. Good news is I can scale them no problem, so... Stupa. What I'd like to do is put in another set of ropes. This set of ropes here is a coherent set. It just happens to be. So we'll just go ahead and duplicate it and make it come out this way. Now we don't really want it to end in the other rope, so we'll move this here. And then we'll duplicate the whole thing and flip it over 180. And then this one comes around the other side, see? Very, very basic setup. Only issue is, what are we going to do with these ropes? I guess the only thing we can do is to try and have them kind of crease over the side, maybe? If we were to rotate these. Oh, it's rotating the wrong side. Oh, well, this one's actually coming in anyway. It's too far, so both of these need to be adjusted so they're not cutting and clipping. And this one is now obviously not going to work because it's just too long. Yeah, that's fine. We can duplicate. No, that didn't duplicate. We can duplicate this guy. Rotate 45. Is that 45? I think that's 45. We'll know in a minute. Oh, come on, Unity. Oh, fuck you. Fuck you so much. What the fuck? Alright, so a big old-fashioned nope from Unity. What is it doing? Why is it not letting me drag like I've been dragging for literally a decade? Let go, wait. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Are you done? Hooray. Don't really know what the fuck it's doing, but clearly neither does it. So in theory, this should be properly aligned and we can just rotate it. In practice, it's actually not properly aligned, but it's close. Close enough that I don't think anybody's going to notice. Anyway, just flip that over. If we bring it up, we can put it in a bollard. Let's go ahead and grab one of those bollards. I don't know. We'll try it. We'll see if that works. Now what we really want is a rope that can do a little bit more than this. I'll have to think about it in terms of how I want these ropes to work. If there's some kind of trick I can think of to make them sort of semi-automatically happen without me having to manually tweak them all the time. Because I do want to just put down ropes like this. I don't want to have to worry about it. And I'm thinking about it, and there's like a couple of basic pathing things, and then I want to be able to drop off of edges. So things like this, for example, I want that to just, boom, fall. So I'll need to have a rope that falls. But the real question is whether or not I can do that using an algorithm. And it seems like, delayed, I'm really going to waste more time on ropes. But the answer is yes, I'm going to waste more time on ropes. Ropes are incredibly important to this game. I know how to make the ropes via this setup, But every single one of these is a unique mesh. And that means that every single one of them is going to suck down quite a bit of time. It makes more sense if I can create just a static array of common meshes. I just don't know how to do it. I'm sort of thinking if there's any sort of way I could potentially make a shader do it, but I can't think of any. I don't know enough about shaders to have a proper rope shader. Because I don't know how to tell the shader how to conform to a surface. So if I knew how to do that, it would be a lot easier. I'm getting super hungry. So we're going to stop pretty soon here. I'm going to think about the rope thing off camera. I'm not sure how much of it I'll get done off camera, but I clearly need to have two different approaches to ropes. I'm going to need to have the ropes that we have already, and we're going to need to have some kind of ropes made out of many, many common meshes instead, because they're a lot cheaper. I'm thinking that might not be too hard. A rope pathing system, all it really needs to do is understand how to do a raycast forward from wherever you're starting. So I put down a bollard, and I tell it to go in a specific direction by pointing the bollard. And it goes, okay, well, I'll just start raycasting, and I'll just keep going. And I have a specific set of moves, like chess pieces, because those are the ones that I happen to have meshes for. So I've got like the slow rotate 45 and all those. And they each have an endpoint that I can hook up to on the far side. And with those in mind, I can do raycasts, and I can try and figure it out. I think that'll be fine. There's just a couple of things that I'm not 100% on, like when you're dropping down and stuff like that. Well, it should be an interesting thing to try. Should I try it now? Oh, sure, I'll try it now. Let's go ahead and start to build it. And if I don't like it, it's no big deal. So down here in scripts, we are going to need a level design script for our ropes. We'll call these composite ropes. Is that how you spell rope? No, that's soap. That's. To be honest, I should probably stop and try the new version of Unity because this one's really bugging out. But hopefully it won't actually be too important for this particular thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a bollard like this one. And you can see there is a blue and a yellow and a red. We're probably going to use the yellow, so that would be up. The blue is obviously incorrect. We don't want a rope coming out of the blue, but we can always change it later. It's no big deal. It's just our starting direction. So we're going to just drop in a composite rope. It's unfortunate, but we have to program it. I won't be finishing this on stream today because I'm really hungry, but that should be okay. Maybe I'll have a few nuts while Writer is opening. In 15 or 20 minutes, Writer will actually open. It's showing me the ability to type, but it hasn't actually opened yet. It has decided to go out and fetch an update rather than actually do its job. Boy, I wish it would do its job. Wouldn't that be nice if Writer would do its job? No, it's important that they download the update first. God damn, seriously? Whatever. Finally, thank you. What, you undid it? Why did you... Whatever. trying to think about the best way to do this, and I think that the best way to do this will be to have... I don't need this. There's a clever way to do it. Hooray! I love it when there's a clever way to do it. So if we know anything about the prefabs, like their location and direction, we should be able to use them and them alone to determine where the rope can go. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a public void go. And that's going to be an item. And basically, we're just going to go from each one, we move along, and we try and find the next position. So we're going to need to have a public vector3. Do we need to do this? No, we don't. We don't even need it here. Okay. So basically, we're going to need a current object, and that's going to be the last thing on the list of prefabs or ourselves, if we don't have a last thing in our list of prefabs. Oh, yeah. So with that in mind, we should be able to get the current position and rotation of the object in question. As long as we always use the same axes for everything, we don't have to know anything about anything else. For now, why don't we just attach a random object, and then we'll go ahead and have the ray casting and all that stuff. What are you doing? Oh. So for now, we're just going to go ahead and say add, and then no. Thank you for being helpful. And now to add the segment, all we have to do is create it inside of ourselves. So game object geo equals game object.instantiate. Wow, that was weird. Next segment with the can I get you to go the fuck away so I can read? Seriously? Why is this like this? So, for some reason, the pop-up is directly on top of the other pop-up, and you can't fucking see it. Why do they do this? Tab to replace, next tip. What the... Do the people who do... This is a paid object, a paid thing, and this is cropped up dozens of times. Do they not use their own setup? Because this is very, very basic. I think this is going to have to be vector 3.0, and then quaternion.identity. I want them to keep their position, though. I just want to... All right, so fuck it. The Roland says, I have code architecture questions. I mean, you can go ahead and ask your code architecture questions. We'll go ahead and try and figure them out. I just am absolutely flummoxed why they're doing this. This is like super obvious. I'm going to go ahead and yell at them for it. Hey, JetBrains. No, don't do, just give me the JetBrains. And then JetBrains Writer. Is this Writer or is this like ReSharper? I can't remember. This is unacceptable and always screws me up. Why is it like this? Do you use your own product? Do you never there we are. All right, so back here. All right, sorry about that. So unfortunately, it's not going to let me look up the arguments on Instantiate, so I'm going to go ahead and Google them. Unity game object.instantiate. Transform parent, instantiate in world space. That's what I needed. So I don't know if this needs to be false or true is the problem. I think it needs to be true. We're going to find out. Then we're just going to add it to our list of prefabs. But here's the thing. We actually want to add it to not ourselves, but the most recent object. All right, that was fun. So this should, at least in theory, be at least some of what we need. So what we're going to do is we're going to give it a prefab. So let's go up into prefabs and build a couple of them. Roland says he's using scriptable objects to create character templates. I want to have a way of generating multiple different characters based off of those so that I can later change them at runtime. Oh, well, congratulations. You found the reason why I always used prefabs instead of scriptable objects. The problem is that prefabs are now hamstrung, but assuming that your prefabs are acceptable, then you should use prefabs instead. The basic idea there is scriptable objects don't have a concept of runtime, not really. And so if you're trying to create an instance of a scriptable object that has different values, you want a prefab that has different values. You want a game object that has different values. It's something where the uses of a scriptable object are really not as much as you might think. They have very specific database-like uses, but people use them for things that make more sense as prefabs because you can create a prefab and edit it, and then you can put it into a game environment and edit that, that one prefab in a scene. And you can, instantiate a prefab. You can also instantiate a scriptable object to create a duplicate, but then you have a permanent duplicate. So I would recommend using prefabs. There are other ways to do it, though. So if you don't like that suggestion, feel free to go ask somebody what their suggestion is. That's strange. Huh. Anyway, prefab time. So if we take a look, what we're going to want to do is these ropes that we're creating. Where's our rope 45 small? Just use this one. They have a specific location, right? What we're going to do is drop that into here, and then we're going to go into it because at 0, 0, 0, we need to have the other end of the rope. All right. So this is what it looks like right now. And so that's 0, 0, 0. Oh, damn. Are we going to have to do it like this? I don't want to do it. No, it should be fine. Let's try it. What we need to do is have it so that this tip here is perfectly lined up with 0, 0, 0, like this. And then what we're going to want to do is change it to, I want to pivot around this point here. Am I going to have to create a second object? Why can't I? I wish there was a way to pivot around a center point. There's a grid snap. I think we're going to have to do this the hard way. That's going to be annoying. I hope that this is just a limitation in Unity. It's not, there's no reason why it would be like this in the actual game environment. But you can see we can't edit it here because it doesn't understand what the hell we're trying to do. So what we're going to have to do is delete that game object, duplicate the rope small, put the rope small inside the rope small, have this rope small be at 0, 0, 0. And then this rope small will move. And then this one will rotate. Yeah, perfect. And then what we're going to want to do is switch which one's on the outside. So correct. Okay, so we can't switch them. This is really not very well designed. This new prefab system is just the worst. All right, so we're going to want to do it without being in a prefab view. That's our prefab. Bonkers. All right, so let's try it. Here's our rope 45 small. So if we tell this to run, let's save it first in case this crashes for some reason. Go. Well, there's a big list of prefabs. Where the hell are they? Are they all inside here? Okay, so here they are. And each one of them cannot instantiate objects with a parent that is persistent. New object will be... What? Cannot instantiate objects with a parent which is persistent. New object will be created without a parent. What does that mean? Why can't you instantiate... I've never seen this error before. Let's look it up. Parents are prefabs. I tried using non-empty. Okay, so this is another problem with their prefabs setup. But in this case, the parent isn't a prefab, so this shouldn't be the case. I was assigning the parents and not the... No? This is the problem. Okay, so I figured out what the issue is. This is a fine error. The error is completely nonsensical. This error is you are trying to instantiate something inside of an uninstantiated prefab. Did you get that out of this error? Because that's not what any of those words mean. So now that I know what the error is, I can fix it because I just have a bug in how I'm doing it. And you can see that what I've got here is this ridiculous setup. So obviously I was adding it to the prefabs for some reason, and it was just being stupid. So what we need to do is, we don't want to add it to the prefabs. We want to have a separate list for the rope elements. There we go. And then what we're going to do is use these. Just a basic logic error, but that was not a very helpful error message. Like, wow. I think that's correct. Try it one more time. There we go. No problems. It didn't work though. It's not in the right place. So switch this out. False. And what we'll do is we will just delete them. Let's go ahead and create a clear function here. While our composite we're going to destroy composite 0 and then composite.remove at 0. We have to use destroy immediate because we're never going to use this during the game. We're only going to use it while we are editing scenes. All right, well, at least it didn't appear down there. Go to it. It's there. Okay, so that's So I'm noticing a lot of problems. Nope, I'm only noticing one. So basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to put an object down. The object has a 0, 0, 0. It has a position and a rotation. But this isn't going to work because I don't have any way to rotate it around. No, I can do that. Okay, so the object has a position and a rotation built into the object. That's this pivot here. The pivot is where the next object will get placed. So in theory, if I set up the prefab so that it's offset by that pivot, then they should get added one to the end of the other. But instead what's happened is that each of them has been rotated and then not added properly offset. So you can see we've got the rotation built right in here, but the motion has ended up lining up their tips instead of end to end. The Relin says he'd use a child game object. I don't think I need one. I think I just don't understand how to do this. But you're right, a child game object would probably be easier to manage. The only problem is it would... No, I suppose I could delete it after I was done with it. Yeah, I think that using a child game object is probably a better idea. It's a little bit flabby. I don't like that. I don't like the flab, but it is probably more sustainable. So we'll go ahead and do exactly that. So here's how it looks when it's properly just at 0, 0, 0. If we add in an empty object, we can move the empty object via the snapping, like so. And then we can rotate it. Now we are currently using the yellow axis, so that's the axis we're going to line up. There we are. And we'll just try and continue using that. I'm not sure that the yellow axis is the right one. We might have to use the blue axis, but you know what? It's actually not that complicated to change, so whatever. Go back out. How do we exit? There it is. So we're going to clear this. And then we're going to change this. So current.transform is not quite right. It's close. It's not quite right. What we need to do is, if we're returning the current, we need to get the child that's within. Can I just say 0? Yeah. So we need to return a transform. Right. So down here, when we set this up with our current, we actually don't want to add it to the current unless the current. Well, let's leave it like this for now. We can clean it up later. I think this will work. Let's find out. Grind, and go. Well, no. So the second one is in the proper space, but it's not rotated correctly. It should be rotated like this. Instead, it didn't keep the rotation. Why didn't it keep the rotation? Is Y just the wrong axis? Yes, it's aligned on the Z axis. No problem. Is that the Z axis? There. Is that proper? No, it's still short. There we are. One more time. Go. Aha. Well, that is far closer to correct than we had before. It's still offset by 90 degrees. Why? Is this because in Blender they're not set up right? Oh, look, they're aligned on the x-axis in Blender. So that's what it is. Well, let's align them on a different axis. I think this is the right axis. Let's find out. Now, obviously, the game object is in the wrong spot now. It's no biggie. Just move it to the new correct location. Is that at 0? Yeah, that's at 0. 3.75 is too many. There we are. If we go into local mode around the pivot, you can see that it's nowhere near the right rotation. So let's reset all these rotation elements and try again. That's 30. I need it at 45. There we are. Let's see whether this works. Oh, there we are. Perfect. So now that we've got it set up correctly, we can get a rope that does whatever we need it to do. And if we set all of these up as static elements, we won't have any problems with rendering. The only question is whether or not we like having that child object, and the answer is no, we don't. So we're going to make it clean. Let's go ahead and clean this up. And we're going to create an empty object called persistent. I'll call it anchor, which we'll mark as static. Why not? And the blue line is where it's going to come out. So there we go, like this. So when we come over to the bollard, we're going to need to be able to specify an anchor. So let's do exactly that. And then instead of returning the game object, we return the anchor. And down here, what we can do is transform anchor. We'll just go ahead and use it. So we can go ahead and say if current equals anchor, then we're going to want to do one thing, this to be exact. Otherwise, we're going to want to do something very slightly different. And the thing is, for the other one, we're going to want to add it to the parent. And then we're going to want to remove current. And what that should do is it should clear out everything that's not the anchor. And we should just get a nice clean line. Let's try it. Go. Ooh, it did not like that. Oh, of course not, because it's not in the right spot. Okay, so we're not going to do that. We're just going to leave it as is. Because otherwise it's going to be some small amount of annoyance to try and set it up. And I don't feel like any small amounts of annoyance. I feel like no annoyances. But what we do want to do is rotate it around some amount. Here's the thing. This should be a point where it is doing raycasts. And the idea here is that we should do a raycast to determine which of these objects to use, but we should also do a raycast to determine whether or not it is a valid direction to go. And then rotate it until we find a valid direction. So in order to do that, we should rotate it randomly and then do a raycast from the base to that anchor. So let's go ahead and set that up as its own function. So rotate randomly should allow us to do what we need to do. We don't need to keep track of who we are because we are the current one. The current one just changed, so no problems. Create array. With the array, we're going to need an origin and a direction. The origin is going to be the current.parent.position. There. And the direction is going to be current.position minus current.parent.position. We don't have to worry about optimizing this because it runs in scene view only, so it's fine. And that'll give us a array, and then we can do a raycast. We don't really care what we run into, so we're not going to keep track of it. All we're going to do is pass it in as array, and then we're going to tell it the max distance, which is going to be the raycast direction. Apparently it doesn't actually work like that. It's already been converted over into something else. That's fine. We'll just type it again. Why? Scale? I don't remember ever having vector 3 scale? Multiplies? No, that's not what I want. I want magnitude. It's just called magnitude. I'm using too many... Where is it? I'm using too many different there it is. I'm using too many different programming languages, and they all call it something else. It's fine. It's fine. You just got to remember. And if you start to whine about it, you just keep looking down. That's what IntelliSense is for. So if there is a raycast, then it's not the right spot. But we haven't rotated it yet. So we're going to want to rotate it first, and then we'll set it up. So in order to rotate it, what we're going to want to do is just apply current.rotate. It should be okay if we just rotate it as long as it's on the z-axis, local z. Thank you. That was exactly what I didn't want. Random.range 0, 360, and then self. Why are you not helping? You autofill every single time I want you to not autofill, and then the moment I want you to autofill, you refuse. Whatever. So we're gonna go ahead and we could make this recursive, but then we're gonna hit some problems later. So instead, what we're gonna do is just create a for int tries equals 0, tries is less than 10, tries plus plus, and then we'll do that. And at the end, we'll just give up if it didn't work. So if we hit array cast, then we just continue. If we didn't hit array cast, then we're fine, and we just leave it. Let's save and try. Go! Woo-ha! That worked fine. Great. The only other thing we got to do is we got to make it have a preference for going down rather than going up. Unless we want the rope to go up, we need to give it a bias either way. So what we're going to do is we are going to we're going to try and find out whether or not the current position is above or below. And if it's above, we are going to roll again. Just once. Is it Z or is it Y? I think it's Y. Now this is like super primitive. We're probably going to change it later because it's a little too primitive. But we'll try it. Go. Ah, see, it went down. But in the end, it went underwater. And the reason for that, or underground, and the reason for that is because there was literally no rotation, which wouldn't drive it underground at that particular point. That's why we need to be a little bit more careful with our choosing of how we're planning to do these kinds of things. Now that question is a little bit more complicated because how does that work? If we put something down and then it can't find a way to actually win, what do we do? Well, I think the ideal thing to do would be to back up. So what we're going to do is if we get here, we're going to return. It worked fine. If we get here, too many tries, we can't move without dropping into a collision. So rewind. So to rewind it, all we're going to do is we're going to destroy. And then we are going to remove it from the composites list. Length, really? Should be a count. I guess they added a helper there because that should be okay. Yeah, let's try it. Now that will actually reduce the length of the rope because the rope has 10 total segments or however many segments I want it to have. But if we reverse and delete a segment, then we are going to end up with 9 or 8 or however many it goes through. So here you can see a rope that worked, but obviously the bias isn't very good. Here you can see a rope that didn't work, so it rewound and tried again. We ended up with only 5 segments. And we might want to rewind more than one segment, I suppose. Let's go ahead and try this here. Maybe we should rewind 2 segments rather than 1. We should go ahead and just do it twice. Yeah, try that. Rewinged. But down here, we're going to want to make sure that our current is not our anchor. Just in case we do something dumb and fire a rope straight at the wall. Oh, those nuts were surprisingly good in terms of keeping me nice and full. Look at that. Not too shabby. Got all 10 there. Just luck. Once again, we got all 10. The downward bias is just not doing the job here. Look at that. We need to figure out a way to get the downward bias a little bit better. I'm trying to think about how to make it look at the end point relative to the parent's position and understand which direction to rotate and how far to rotate to get it to work. But I don't think that's what I want. I think what I want is to raycast from the tip. And if it's... Maybe I should just... Because generally speaking, we don't actually want it to go down most of the time. We want it to stay flat most of the time. We want it to go down if it has to go down. We want it to go up if it has to go up. But trying to figure that out, I suppose I could do a raycast downwards and determine whether or not it's above or below the parent point and then rotate correctly. Well, that's kind of complicated. For now, let's just try being a total dork. And then we will try and figure it out how to do it, actually. I think we're going to have to do a raycast downwards and try and figure out if we need to go down or up or what. So you can see that we're not really getting ropes that make sense. But if the ropes are made out of something lightweight, this kind of floating is not too shabby. We just don't want... It's just too floaty. We're going to need to understand how to not float. We're definitely on the right track, though. This is not a terrible idea. Look at that. It managed to pass through the ground. But that's because those don't have any colliders. So it actually did it correctly. Good. It's just that some of these things don't have colliders, so it got a little carried away. Look, it got stuck there. Even though I was telling it to rewind by a lot, it still got stuck. That one's definitely too floaty. This is the y-axis, right? Yeah. All right, so what we're going to have to do is try and determine where the ground is at the location in question. So current dot position. And then we're going to want to have a vector 3 dot down. But we're going to want to add... There we are. And so then we can do a raycast hit. Then we can come in to our tries and try this. So let's just comment this out for a couple of minutes. We'll come back to it later. This part we need. But instead of doing a ray cast along the course of the rope, we're going to do a ray cast according to our new ray, and the length will just be 10. Out hit. Why is this barfed? Oh, it's just backwards. Gosh, if only there was some way to see that stuff while I was typing it in. All right, so I'm blanking here. Like if we get a raycast hit, then we want to know where the location is. So we're going to need to have a vector3 ground, and we're going to have it default to current dot position float ground current dot parent dot position dot y ground equals hit dot point dot y. So with that in mind, we now have a workable location, a y position for our setup. What we would like to do is rotate the mesh until it is roughly correct. I just don't know how to have it know how far that is. We don't need the tries anymore. Rotating the mesh until it hits the ground will brute force it because I don't feel like figuring out tangents. So what we'll do is we'll choose a direction. So we're just going to randomly choose either 1 or -1, and then we're going to just rotate until the until it's in the right place. So while current dot position dot y minus ground is greater than 0.2f, do this. The problem is we can easily end up with an infinite loop here. So we're going to want to make sure that this is not done like this. For int, put the tries back in. If the area is close to the ground, then return. We're done. Otherwise, rotate. Well, let's make offset a little bit bigger. Let's do it in 5-degree increments, which means that we can use, say, 50 tries. Yeah, that should be fine. So the only issue here is that it might be impossible for us. Let's just, better idea. If delta is less than best range, then delta best range equals delta. Otherwise, return. I don't think we need to worry about the tries, but we'll leave them there because it's pretty straightforward. Now, we're certainly not doing any raycasts along the rope, so we're probably going to have to put that back in. But let's try this out. Let's see if it goes the right way, because what we should see is a rope that flops. Well, that's not what I want. Of course the rope can spin forever if there's no ground. So I think what happened is that the raycasting wasn't working right. Let's try it again. I don't think we want to have 50 here. That's a little bit much. Let's go back down to something manageable. So it never errored. It never said that it was incorrect, but you can clearly see that it's going in circles. I don't believe it's rotating much at all. It looks like it's rotating 5 degrees, meaning that it's immediately giving up. What did I screw up? Basic logic thing going wrong here. Probably because I'm starting to get tired. Go. So you can see that what we've got is 0, 1.64, 181, 1. So what's happening here is that it's exactly the same distance away all the time. Is that right? I think that's right. That might have been why it was wrong in the first place. I bet all of this was because I was rotating the wrong thing. I was rotating the end point, which didn't have any ropes attached to it. So obviously it was getting screwed up. I need to rotate the base point. So here we've got a situation. I think we're going to get this every single time. But if I take a look, we have the same issue. Maybe that's just leftover nonsense. Yeah, this is better. So here you can see that we're getting the same thing over and over and over. That's because there's no randomness to this aside from which way it rotates. But that said, it's still doing things like plunging through the ground and stuff. We'll have to think about it. Obs says hello. So I think that what we want to do is maybe just do at the end. We'll just do one more rotation. No, this isn't right. So what confuses me, what do you use to back up your project? I use Tortoise SVN. So it's old, but it suits me. What I don't get is this one. So the thing here is that it's like coming off the edge, and it's not really built to do that. So let's go ahead and try it with something that's a little bit more in tune with what we'd like. Interesting. It's not really what I want. See, it's doing this thing where it goes through the ground. It's creating something that's kind of right, but not. I'll have to think about it. Ob says you commit binary files, everything. No, you don't have to do that. So over in your settings, I can't remember how. I set it up once and I haven't bothered to worry about it since. You can set these things up to help you do backups. Just look it up online. It's really pretty basic. It should be in the correct mode by default, and you don't have to commit binaries. You just commit the project script files. I mean, not the just the asset files, rather than the builds and that sort of stuff. It's set up specifically to help you with that. There are like built-in plugs that you can just hook up to your SVN or whatever. But I haven't had to do that in a while, so I don't remember where they are. You'll have to look that up yourself. Sorry. See, this is weird. Why did it do this? I mean, it should have obviously done this. Why is it going up? It should have obviously been going down like this, right? So why did it go up? Oh, you know what? So basically, no, if it's increasing, it shouldn't do that. Let me. Yeah, that's correct. So basically what I think happened is that they got stuck at like a 45-degree angle pointing up, and then I randomly chose which direction to go, and I chose the direction that was further up. And what that meant is that it immediately stopped. So now it should go all the way around. Wow, it does the exact opposite of what I want. That is better than not doing anything recognizable. So this is correct. It's just going the wrong way. I have to think about it. My brain stopped working, and I'm not getting out any good assets here. I will work on it offline. I'll see you on Wednesday when we'll finish it up. Thanks. Bye.